been writing for a long time. I've published 7 books and have written closer to 10, and in this video, I'm gonna share with you my 10 best tips for beginner writers. Things that I've learned over the past however many years that I've been writing that have really helped me and that most helped me be able to improve as a writer. Some of these are actionable tips, things that you can try and do that really helped me level up. Some of these are mindset tips and ways that I approached writing in general that really helped me keep moving forward. I'm really excited to dive in, so I'm just gonna start. Just a little bit about me in case this is your first time finding my channel. My name is Fraise and I write paranormal thriller books. I have one series called They Stay, which is inspired by Stranger Things and Fear Street, about a group of teenagers who have to fight this evil necromancer who's killing kids and bringing the ghosts of dead kids back to life inside their bodies, kind of very creepy. I have another series that I am just beginning and I'm just publishing book 1 of that series. It's called The Love Trials. This is a book series about a group of ghost hunters who hunts the ghosts of serial killers. And the first book, The Love Trials, is Enemies to Lovers meets Saw. It's about a serial killer who takes couples and makes them play deadly games like in Saw, designed to break their love, only he accidentally takes a pair of enemies instead. So I write commercial fiction. My book, They Stay, also won the grand prize at the Writer's Digest 2023 Self-Published Book Awards, and all of this becomes relevant to the video later. Just wanted to give you a heads up as to who I was so you would have an idea as to how I'm coming at this and the point of view through which I am looking at writing as a whole. So my first big piece of advice is just start writing. Don't sink a ton of time into learning how to write before doing it. The only way that you're actually gonna learn how to write a book is by starting to write a book. This is a messy process. Everything when you just started out is a messy process. If you start a new hobby, if you start trying to acquire any kind of new skill, you're not very good at it at the beginning and it's uncomfortable. I know personally, I feel very uncomfortable when I'm bad at something, and so it's hard for me to start new things because I have to go through that messy first period of time where I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing and I am really pretty bad at it. But the only way to improve at that thing is by going through that messy period and just continuously doing it. If you're bad at crocheting and you crochet for a week and you still can't figure it out and you throw your crochet needles into a basket and kick it underneath the couch and you never take them out again and never use them again, you're not gonna get better at crocheting. But if you sit down and you make weird little crocheted squares for a really long period of time, and every single time you make a crochet square you choose one thing to focus on, like you're going to focus on making your stitches a little bit tighter, or you're going to focus on a new type of stitch, or you're going to make your corners really square over time, and with all of that practice your crochet squares will ultimately look better. If I got really into my head when learning how to crochet and read a ton of articles about like how to crochet and crochet best tips and tried to learn everything about crocheting before even trying a basic stitch, I would get very overwhelmed, and I also probably would not be able to accelerate my learning of crocheting that way, because knowing something intellectually is different than actually doing it. Knowing how to do a stitch on paper is different than actually moving the yarn with my needle or crochet hook, you know what I mean? So if you want to write a book, just jump in and start writing and don't waste a lot of time reading about writing before you do it. Just do it. My second tip is that persistence is key. So now you're excited to write a book, you jump in and you're just gonna start doing it, and you write your first chapter and you have a really, really great day and you're all energized and can't wait to be writing that book. And then the next day you write and you write some more, and like you're on chapter 2 and things are happening and things are really great. And then the next day you write and now you're on chapter 3, and you know, there's a little thread from chapter 1, you're not entirely sure what to do with it and things are getting a little overwhelming, but you sit down and you finish chapter 3, but you're not feeling that good about it. Then the 4th day comes along and you're writing chapter 4 and things are confusing. You don't really know what to do with chapter 4. Your idea feels wrong, like you're sitting down to write and it just doesn't feel right, and you just stop writing and you go take a break and you don't come back to it. And then the 5th day comes along and you just don't really want to write that much. You would rather not write, you don't feel like writing, you're unmotivated, and you think you're gonna go do something else. If you want to improve as a writer, you have to sit your butt down in the chair and write when you don't want to. Writing a book takes an extraordinary amount of persistence. It takes you sitting in front of that computer or journal or however you write every single day, engaging with that piece of text and moving the story forward. If you don't have this kind of fire in your belly persistence, and you only wait to write when you're feeling motivated, that book is not gonna get finished. I write every single day. I work on my books every single day. There are plenty of times where I'm tired, I don't really feel like it, but I am so obsessed with writing that even when I don't feel like it, I still sit down and do it anyway. And I've been doing that since I was 13 years old. So over a period of 13 to 14 years, that has helped me improve as a writer because I've been forcing myself to actually write. I wish I had a hack for you or some piece of advice for how to make this part easier, but I really don't. You just have to do it, and you have to figure out deep inside yourself why you want to write that book so badly and what is motivating you, and you have to make that motivation strong enough to get you into that chair and engaging with that book even when it's challenging, because otherwise you're just not going to be writing enough to really improve. Sometimes it can feel like I'm standing on the other side of a locked door, and if I am jiggling the doorknob and kind of trying to open the door, it's probably not going to budge. But if I repeatedly throw my full body weight against that door every single day, eventually that door is going to come down. But if I just kind of like try it once and then it doesn't budge and I give up, the door is not going to move. One of the very first videos I made on the channel was about first drafts or something along those lines. And one of the pieces of advice that I gave in that video was, on the days that you don't want to write, just sit your butt in the chair. And if you don't want to, too bad. It's still true. Too bad. Go write your book. My third piece of advice is to write a lot and don't get hung up on perfection. Focus on quantity and not necessarily quality. I don't know if this is controversial advice, but it has really helped me because I'm a super duper perfectionist. And if I put pressure on myself that my writing has to be absolutely perfect, I'm never going to be able to move on from it. I'm never going to be able to finish it. I still struggle with this when coming off of a book. Like if I come off of a proofread and I just publish a book and I start a new draft one, I have to do a full mental reset because I'm used to the published version of the book being perfect, and I'm like, I try to make my first drafts perfect from the get-go and they never are, and I have to be comfortable in the mess. And if I put pressure to have my first drafts be perfect, then it's really hard for me to get any words on the page because I get so in my head and just everything gets really jammed up. So I focus on quantity and I just try to write as much text as I can and separate drafting from editing later. The actual act of writing, drafting, and then revising is what makes you better. What doesn't make you better is overthinking everything and like worrying about your dialogue and your setting and your description and all of these different pieces as you're trying to draft. You only get better at these things once they become internalized. As soon as I'm not thinking about, oh, I need to make my dialogue sound natural. Oh, I need to make sure I describe this enough. Oh, I have to make sure that my characters are spaced clearly throughout the scene. Oh, I have to make sure that my characters grow and change over the course of the scene. If I'm thinking about all those things while I'm drafting, I won't really be doing any of those things because I can't hold them all in my brain at one time. The only time that those start firing on all cylinders is once they're just internalized and I don't have to consciously think about it. Once I'm doing it subconsciously, that's when it starts appearing in my text in the early drafts. But the only way for these things to become subconscious is by actively doing them and writing a lot. This is probably going to be not a very helpful metaphor for anybody unless you're also a horse person, but I ride horses and I did dressage for a couple of years, and my trainer always told me that you can't correct anything in the horse's front. Like you can't ask for their face, you can't ask them to collect unless you have energy moving through their body. So they have to be moving forward. They have to have energy, like propulsive energy forward, before you even try to ask them to lift up or lift in their face or anything like that. And so the first thing that if my horse was kind of like flattening out or like he was dragging his feet, the first fix before I even touched his face to try to get him to collect again would be to try to ask him to move forward. And as soon as he had that energy, he would start engaging more. Writing is kind of like that too. Like you need to have the forward momentum and forward energy and actually be writing a lot before you think about fixing other things. Because the way I would make things subconscious is like I'd have words on the page and then while I was editing, I'd be like, oh, I want to fix the dialogue and make it more natural. So I'd go through and I'd make all the dialogue more natural after the fact. Or I want to make sure that these descriptions are really clear. So I'd go through and I'd change all of my descriptions after the fact, but I couldn't do any of that unless I already had the draft. So you have to be writing a lot and constantly flexing that muscle in your brain to make writing come easier. It takes a long time though. Like even me now at 26, when I'm writing my drafts, sometimes it still feels sticky, but I write a lot and I've written enough that my first drafts now hold together way better than my first drafts did when I was 13 or 14. But if I just had one book and I was constantly rewriting it from the time I was 13 to now, I wouldn't have produced enough new text. I would just be like revising old text for a long period of time. I wouldn't have produced enough new stuff for all of those things to really have solidified in my brain. My fourth tip is go through the process of outlining. Now I know that some of you who are watching this are gonna be like, oh, I'm a pantser, I can't outline. And I understand that, I get it. I totally understand that plotting is not for everybody. However, plotting still does have a place, I believe, in the education of every writer. If you don't like using plotting before you write a book, then you can use plotting after you write the book. But the act of analyzing your story and understanding all of the components that go into building a story helps you not have to do it as much later. I don't have to plot my books in nearly as much detail as I did when I first started writing. For my book, The Love Trials, that outline came to me in like one crazy day where it just all poured out of me, fully formed onto a Word document, just all of the scenes in the exact order, and I understood exactly how everything was going to fit together. I understood roughly who the characters were, and just all of it came to me at once. And that plot is basically still the same as it was in that first version. My book, They Whisper, completely different. My book, They Return, completely different. They Stay, also completely different. Love Trials was basically the same from the beginning outline to the end. I think it's because I'd internalized so much about story structure as I'd written the previous books, because I'd gone through the exercise of plotting out the book, drafting the book, and then looking at my outline and trying to understand what wasn't working from a storytelling perspective and moving things around on the outline. If you are a plotter, I personally love using a method like a plot grid to pick a story structure like the hero's journey and then be able to plot out all of my subplots and main plots and figure out how all of them are going to develop over the course of the entire book. If you are a pantser, what I would recommend doing is writing the book, just pantsing the book, because if that's what actually gets you writing, then that's what you should be doing. Pants the book, but after you have a story or after you reach a point where you're overwhelmed or you're like, you have no idea what to do with it, maybe it's in the middle, or if you finish the book, awesome. Once you have a giant chunk of text, go through it and then make an outline about what you have written already so that you can dissect it and understand all of the things that are functioning inside the story. Understand the different plot points and their relations to each other, because now when I create characters or I create character arcs, I don't necessarily know why they work, I just know that they do. I'll just be like, that feels right to me. And I don't necessarily always know intellectually why, but the reason that I have such a good gut now is because I've done the exercise where I've made myself figure out intellectually why, and now it's internalized and I can just have a better sense for it. But I wouldn't have that sense if I hadn't gone through that. So I highly, highly, highly recommend doing that. Before we continue, I want to take a second to talk about the sponsor of this week's video, which is Vellum. Vellum is a book formatting software that allows you to take your manuscript and turn it into a professionally formatted book in minutes without needing to hire a formatter or learn complex design software. You can format ebooks and print books with just a few clicks, choosing from dozens of pre-made styles that cover everything from chapter headings, scene breaks, and drop caps to front matter, back matter, and generated tables of contents. It handles all the technical stuff automatically, so your book looks polished and professional across every format and device. I've used Vellum to format every single book that I've ever self-published. It is a one-time purchase and has saved me hundreds of dollars per book that I'd otherwise spend on a professional formatter, and I have complete control over exactly how my book looks. It's fully customizable, and Vellum lets me see real-time previews of my book, so I can make adjustments and instantly see how they'll look on a Kindle or as a physical book. Then with one click of a button, I have a file that's ready to upload. I only work with sponsors on the channel that I recommend wholeheartedly and use personally, and I absolutely love Vellum and recommend them 100%. If you're interested in trying Vellum, you can find the link in the description of this video. My fifth tip is don't be scared of sharing your writing with other people. I get it, I understand that this is some people's worst fear, but feedback from other people and critical feedback is so important in leveling yourself up as a writer. I have had so many people in my life tell me that my writing was terrible, that I sounded like an amateur fan fiction writer, my book was the worst book that they'd ever read. And some of this is just criticism that's not very helpful. It's just like, it wasn't their kind of book, it wasn't their thing. I get it, that's great. cool. But other pieces of feedback and other critical comments that I had gotten that were more detailed and like pointing out things that like, you know, maybe this person did think that I was just like an awful writer, but they had a couple of things in there that they'd pointed to when telling me that I had done something wrong with a particular piece of work that I'd submitted somewhere. But hearing those things challenged me to take a critical eye onto myself, figure out exactly how I could improve in that area, and really focus in on improving in that area. And those steps were really important in me leveling up. I wouldn't have gotten those pieces of feedback if I didn't put myself in uncomfortable positions where I shared my work with other people. To be super real with you, so what if people don't like your writing? Literally, what is the worst thing that could happen? Answer it. The worst thing that someone could say about your writing is, I hate it. I hate you for some reason. I don't think that you're cut out to do this. I never want to read anything of yours ever again. And you're terrible and you suck. That's really honestly the worst thing that could happen. And if their criticism is unfounded and unhelpful like that, you can just say, okay, have a good life, and never listen to it. But if you do have a piece of critical feedback that, like for me, one time I had a writing coach say that I had absolutely no voice. And that was really interesting to me because I hadn't really ever thought about voice before in my writing. I was just trying to tell stories. And that really forced me to learn about voice and learn how to write in different characters' voices. And that helped me level up. And that's a very net positive thing that happened, even though she was pretty mean when she told it to me in her delivery. The worst case scenario is someone's mean, you ignore them, and then if they are helpful, then they can teach you how to improve. So really there's no bad thing that happens other than like the risk of people being mean, but you're tough, you can handle it, and you get the potential for a very positive thing to come out of it, which is you being able to improve your writing. So I would share your writing in as many places as you can. Find critique partners, get beta readers to read it, just share it broadly and take criticism in like a sponge with no ego, and work to improve that way. My sixth tip is an obvious one, and this one is to read a lot, both actively and passively. You should be reading passively just like as a consumer of books. Like read what you love, read what is fun for you to read, because the act of reading a lot of the time also helps you internalize certain things about character, about storytelling, about pacing. You might not necessarily know that you're internalizing these things, but your ear will start to recognize the cadence of well-written prose, and you'll just start to pick up on things subconsciously of like how a story is supposed to go rhythm-wise. So when I was trying to teach myself how to write in high school, one thing that I would do a lot would be to take a book that I liked, that I thought was well written, that I enjoyed, and try to figure out what choices the author had made in a particular chapter in the story in general in order to tell the story in an effective manner. For example, I would take something like chapter 1 of The Hunger Games, and I would read the opening page, and because I've read this book so many times, I can like picture exactly what it says. Almost. It says something like, when I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. And then in that paragraph, she like turns over and she like Katniss feels in the bed, and she feels that it's cold because Prim had left and I think crawled in with her mom. And, you know, she talks about nightmares. And then at the end of that paragraph, it says something like, obviously she had a nightmare because today is the day of the reaping. So that's the point of entry that Suzanne Collins chose. And then I would ask myself, why? What is that point of entry accomplishing? Usually the piece of writing advice is not to start a book with somebody waking up in the morning, but clearly this particular case, it worked really well. So why? It's an active way to establish both that the reaping day is something to have nightmares about, to raise questions about like what the reaping is at the end of the paragraph, to also quickly tie in the bond between Katniss and her younger sister in just one paragraph. In this paragraph, you find out that Katniss and Prim are really bonded and usually sleep in the same bed together. The reaping is giving Prim nightmares, and that is somehow unusual for her to get out of the bed where Katniss is sleeping. All of these things become incredibly important in just a couple pages in that first chapter. So turning a critical storytelling eye onto pieces of fiction that you find effective also is very, very helpful. At least it really helped me. My seventh tip is to write what you love. Write something that makes you just totally light up from the inside with excitement. Like you want to write something that you're obsessed with. Don't write something because you think that you should or because you think that the market is going to want it. Write what you absolutely love. The amount of joy that comes from working on a story that you love is unmatched. And writing a book is freaking hard. Why would you do it if you didn't have a story that you really wanted to tell and that made you really excited? Have fun with it. Writing should be fun. Writing should be something that makes you feel playful. It should not be something that you take incredibly seriously. Do not take yourself seriously. Take yourself seriously in the sense that you're sitting your butt in the chair and you are going to finish that book and you are going to make it happen and you're going to be persistent. Do not take yourself seriously in the sense that you need to write a serious book. Write whatever you want that makes you happy. I chased the feeling that I had when I was 8 through 12 and I would read Percy Jackson or The Hunger Games or The Maze Runner, and I would be obsessed. I would stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning reading underneath the covers. I would look at fan art all the time. I'd listen to music and I'd cry because it would make me think of the characters, and that is the feeling that I want to have as an adult while I'm writing, because that feeling is the best, and getting to do this gives me that feeling. 8th tip is read some good craft books. Don't fall into the hole where you're trying to learn as much as you can about writing before you start writing. Don't be obsessed with watching writing YouTube videos and things like that without actually also working on your book. I mean, obviously always watch mine, but go work on your book first. But there are a couple of writing craft books that I have found very helpful that I would recommend reading. Not before you write a book, just in tandem as you're writing many, many books. The first one that I will recommend to everybody always is Dynamic Story Creation by Maxwell Alexander Drake. That is the best book on writing craft that I have ever read, and that fundamentally changed the way that I think about storytelling. I don't have Dynamic Story Creation with me right now because it's on my desk, because that's how important this book is to me. I keep it on my writing desk. Maxwell Alexander Drake has 2 other books too that I recommend giving a read depending on what you're looking for. And he has one on point of view where he goes through all of the different types of POVs and how to write from first person, third person, and all that stuff. Dynamic Story Creation to me is the best one, but The Show Don't Tell is also very good. Stephen King's On Writing is a classic and always one that I would recommend. I really love Story by Robert McKee. That's a classic, and that was one of my favorite books on writing. It's technically a screenwriting book, but it's just a good storytelling book. And Self-Editing for Fiction Authors I also find incredibly useful as a resource. My copy is so marked up and beat up because I use it all the time. I also love this book. It's called The Magic Words. This is children and YA book specific, but I think it is an incredible resource for people that are looking to write YA. I just think that it's really well done and well thought out. My 9th tip is choose one thing at a time to get better at so that you don't get overwhelmed. I've always found that if I try to hold too many things in my head, if I'm thinking about dialogue and I'm thinking about description and I'm thinking about pacing all at the same time, then none of those things actually get accomplished because I just get overwhelmed and I can't hold that many things at a time in my head. So I like to focus on one thing at a time, and I do multiple drafts where I dedicate a different pass over the book to a different thing. I don't really do this anymore because I'm able to hold more things in my head now, but that came from a long time of practicing this. Years ago, I would do a different draft for description, a different draft for dialogue, a different draft for just all those different things where I would only focus on that one thing and I'd turn a critical eye to my book and try to make all of those elements better. It was tedious, it took a long time, but that exercise made everything feel more manageable because it broke it down into bite-sized chunks. It felt possible. It didn't feel oh my gosh, how am I gonna remember all those things? That's impossible. Having one thing at a time made everything feel like I could do it. My last tip, and this is a really important one, is only listen to the advice of people who are doing what you want to be doing and have written books that you like, even if they're not in your genre, that you think are good quality. There are so many people out there that will get on their soapbox and talk to you about writing and tell you what you should and should not be doing when they can't write a good book themselves. Do not listen to advice from those people. I had so many creative writing teachers and professors that had careers where they would, write a handful of short stories or maybe, one novel, and their novel had gotten, a little bit of acclaim here and there, but it had 7 reviews on Amazon and they weren't selling anything, and that's why they were teaching. And some of the times they would have decent advice, but I think it's really important for you to find mentors and people whose advice that you trust who actually have things to point to when they're talking about writing or who are out there doing the work. I had professors in college who had written like the profile of the person I was just talking about, like had written some short stories, had never published a book, but they were teaching creative writing classes because like their short stories had been published in some journals. And I would go to these creative writing professors and I'd be like, I want to write books. I don't want to write short stories. I just want to write books and I want to self-publish them. And can you tell me how I can make this into a career? And they would tell me that I can't write books, that I should be writing short stories, that I could never get anything published if I hadn't written short stories, that I wouldn't be able to make a career out of being an author, and that I should never self-publish because, you know, the industry looks down upon it. It was terrible advice. I've been out of college now for 5 years and published 6 books in that time. Now I have more books published than that creative writing professor who told me that I couldn't do what I wanted to do and that I shouldn't had short stories published at the time. And he was significantly older than I am. So if I had listened to that professor, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now on this channel. I wouldn't have published any of the books that I have published. I wouldn't have won the awards for They Stay that I have won. I wouldn't have been able to find my readers directly on TikTok for the love trials and have that completely change my career this year. And I wouldn't have learned all of these ways that I can connect directly with my readers that are now available to me. I want to write long form stories. I've never been interested in writing short form stories. And in 2026, there are so many opportunities available to authors to reach readers directly that didn't exist a really long time ago. A lot of these did exist at the time that I was in college, so this is not really excusing that professor, but whatever. I was in college in like 2017 through 2021, and there were tons and tons of people making tons of money self-publishing at the time. But if you want to write short stories, then I'm probably not the best resource for you. All of this to say, find people who are actually boots on the ground doing what you want to be doing to take advice from. Find people who can point to their work and be like, yes, I've written these books. This is what I do. This is my experience. And this is how I'm approaching something from. Not people who try to make themselves sound like they know everything and, you know, they're a writing genius and you should listen to exactly what they say when they have not published many books, or their books are very poorly reviewed, or you've read their books and you're like, oh, I don't really like this. Because there are tons of people out there that have really awesome careers in writing that have been able to find readers directly and build writing careers that in a bunch of different ways. So there's no one right or wrong way to build a career as an author. I've just found in my writing education that there are a lot of people who are all talk and no action. And so I highly recommend trying to make sure that you find people that have the action to support what they're telling you. So all of that to say, learning how to write is an organic process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that's linear. It's something that takes a lot of persistence, that's really hard, but it is something that should be fun and that you should do because you're passionate about it. Probably one of my biggest pieces of advice would be to chase the passion and chase the love and make sure that you are feeling excited, and to make sure that you're chasing that feeling of being obsessed with a story and fangirling about it. And then it's just an enjoyable process all around. And writing should be fun, and you should do it because you're passionate about it, not because you feel like you're being forced to. So I think I've talked enough. Those are my 10 best tips for beginner writers. I hope that video is interesting and or helpful to you. If you have a second, I would be super grateful if you could like this video and also subscribe to my channel. My name is Fraise, and I'm an award-winning author who makes weekly videos sharing actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I'm the author of the 5-book paranormal thriller They Stay series, along with The Love Trials, which is coming out on April 28th and available for pre-order. I will put the link in the description. I also published my debut novel when I was in high school, and so that's the 7th book that I talked about in this video, like that I included in the count. I hope you have a good week, everybody, and as always, happy writing.